The alien princess stood before me, her silver skin glowing faintly under the dim lights of the Earth outpost. Her large, reflective eyes shimmered as they locked onto mine, pleading silently even before she spoke. Her voice was like music, a melody that carried a mix of desperation and determination. "I have no choice," she began, her words trembling yet firm. "Take me as your slave." The word lingered in the air, as though she had wrestled with it, unfamiliar yet necessary. I blinked, caught between disbelief and a swirl of other, more complicated feelings. Her name was Kalira, a high-ranking princess from the Zenithian Empire, one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Yet here she was, in front of a scrappy Earth pilot like me, wearing a strange blend of defiance and vulnerability. Her tall, graceful frame contrasted sharply with the utilitarian setting of the outpost, a place more accustomed to cargo haulers than royalty. Her silken robe, though tattered, clung in ways that made it hard to focus on her predicament rather than her presence. My throat tightened, but I managed to respond. "Kalira, I don't think you understand what you're asking." She stepped closer, her movements deliberate and almost hypnotic. "I understand perfectly," she replied, her tone growing more resolute. "My people betrayed me. They aligned with your enemies and left me for dead. If I return to them, I'll face execution. But you, Earthling, your kind values loyalty and strength. I've studied your culture. I've seen what you do to those who serve you. She hesitated, her cheeks, if that's what you could call the iridescent hue blooming across her face, flushed with something that seemed almost human. "I need to belong somewhere, even if it means surrendering completely." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process her words. "This isn't how we handle things," I said, though the way her gaze pinned me down made my voice falter. "You're talking about slavery. That's not something we do." Kalira's lips curved into a faint, almost teasing smile, though her eyes remained serious. "Earthlings have a curious way of defining things," she said, her voice softening. "I've seen how your soldiers bond with those they protect, how your leaders inspire devotion. You call it partnership, but the line between servitude and loyalty is often blurred." Her fingers brushed against the edge of my uniform, sending a spark of electricity through the air. "I'm not asking for chains, Jake. I'm asking for guidance, for purpose. And yes, for control. You could mold me into what you need. Isn't that what Earthlings desire?" The weight of her words hit me like a freight ship. There was an undertone to her plea, one that danced dangerously close to something far more intimate. Her kind had always been known for their directness, but this was something else entirely. I swallowed hard, my mind racing between the absurdity of her request and the undeniable allure of her presence. "Your royalty," I said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "You're used to giving orders, not taking them. You'd hate every second of it." Her laugh was low and musical, sending a shiver down my spine. "You think too highly of me," she said, her gaze dropping for the first time. "In my world, royalty is a prison. Every decision is dictated by duty, every action scrutinized. I've never had the freedom to choose until now. And I choose you." She looked up again, her eyes blazing with intensity. "I choose to submit to you, Jake, not because I'm weak, but because I trust you to be strong enough for both of us." The room seemed to shrink as she closed the distance between us, her presence overwhelming in a way that defied logic. I could feel the heat radiating off her, the sheer alienness of her form both intimidating and intoxicating. "You're asking for something you can't take back," I warned, my voice rougher than I intended. "If I agree, this isn't just a game. It's real." Kalira tilted her head, her silvery hair cascading like liquid starlight. "Good," she said simply. "I want it to be real." She reached out, her slender fingers brushing against my chest, tracing the insignia on my jacket. "Show me what it means to belong to a human. Teach me your ways, your boundaries, your desires." Her voice dropped to a whisper, and for a moment the world outside the room ceased to exist. "I'll do anything you ask. Just don't send me back to a life where I'm nothing more than a puppet." The air between us was charged, every word, every movement laced with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. I should have walked away, should have told her to find another way, but something about her raw honesty, her willingness to surrender everything, held me captive. This wasn't about power or dominance, it was about trust, about two lost souls finding solace in a universe that had turned its back on them. And as I looked into her luminous eyes, I realized that maybe, just maybe, We could both find what we were searching for. I exhaled slowly, my breath hitching as Kalira's fingers lingered on my chest. Her touch was both tentative and deliberate, like she was testing the boundaries of her own resolve. My mind raced to find some logical argument to counter her plea, but every word she spoke, every movement she made, seemed to draw me deeper into her web. Her alien elegance was overwhelming, and her unwavering focus on me felt like a gravity well I couldn't escape. "Kalira," I began, my voice catching slightly. "You're asking for something complicated. Humans don't take this kind of responsibility lightly." Her lips parted slightly, her expression shifting to one of genuine curiosity. "Responsibility," she repeated, tasting the word like it was a new flavor. "That's what I want. For someone to take responsibility for me, to shape me, to guide me, even when I resist. Isn't that what you humans do best? You tame the wild, conquer the unknown." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something playful dancing across her face. "You're not afraid of me, are you, Jake?" Her challenge made my pulse quicken, and I found myself standing straighter, unwilling to let her provoke me so easily. Afraid, I shot back, my tone sharper than I intended. "No, but I'm not naive enough to think this is as simple as you're making it sound. You've got no idea what you're signing up for." Her smile deepened, and she stepped closer, her slender frame now only inches from mine. "Then show me," she whispered, her voice low and daring. "Teach me, Earthling. Show me what it means to be yours." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking into my chest. The way she framed it, "yours," sent a jolt through me, one that I tried to ignore but couldn't fully suppress. Kalira was no ordinary woman, no ordinary being. Her every word carried layers of meaning, teasing out emotions and desires I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. "You're playing a dangerous game," I warned, my voice dropping to match hers. "Good," she replied, her silver eyes locking onto mine. "I'm tired of safe choices. I've spent my entire life trapped in obligations, traditions, and expectations. You, Jake, are the first person to ever offer me something real." She reached up, her fingers lightly brushing against the side of my jaw. "I don't want to be the princess anymore. I want to be yours." The room seemed to grow warmer, the air thick with tension. Her proximity was intoxicating, her alien beauty a blend of softness and strength that defied description. But beneath the allure, there was a vulnerability in her eyes, a rawness that spoke of someone desperate to find her place in a universe that had cast her aside. I took a step back, needing space to think, to breathe. Her hand dropped to her side, but her gaze never wavered. "This isn't just about you," I said, trying to steady my voice. "If I agree to this, it's not some fantasy, it's real. You'd be giving up your freedom, your autonomy. You'd have to trust me completely, and that's not something you can take back." Her expression softened, and for the first time I saw a hint of fear in her eyes. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her composure. "And I'm willing to take that risk, because the alternative is far worse." And I studied her for a long moment, torn between the ethical minefield she was dragging me into and the undeniable pull I felt toward her. This wasn't just a question of morality, it was about connection, about two beings from vastly different worlds finding a shared understanding in the chaos. Kalira stepped forward again, her movements slow and deliberate. She reached for my hand, her fingers cool against mine as she guided it to rest against the smooth, shimmering skin of her neck. Her pulse beat steadily beneath my fingertips, a rhythm that felt almost human. "Feel that," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's trust, Jake. That's me putting my life, my future, in your hands." The intensity of her words sent a shiver down my spine, and I found myself unable to look away from her. Her vulnerability was disarming, her willingness to surrender both unnerving and captivating. "You're not making this easy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she leaned closer, her breath warm against my cheek. "Good," she whispered, her tone teasing yet sincere. "Nothing worth having ever is." The tension between us crackled like static electricity, every word, every gesture loaded with meaning. I knew I should walk away, should refuse her request and find another way to help her, but the truth was, I didn't want to. Kalira's plea wasn't just about survival, it was about belonging, about finding something real in a universe that often felt cold and unyielding. "All right," I said finally, my voice low but firm. "But if we do this, it's on my terms. You follow my lead, no questions asked." Her eyes lit up, a mixture of relief and exhilaration washing over her face. "I wouldn't have it any other way," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion underlying her words. I took a deep breath, the reality of what I'd just agreed to sinking in. This wasn't going to be easy for either of us, but as Kalira stepped closer, her hand slipping into mine with a quiet confidence, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about duty or responsibility. It was about trust, about forging a bond that could withstand the chaos of the galaxy. Kalira's smile deepened as she looked up at me, her silver eyes glowing with a warmth that felt almost human. "So, where do we begin?" she asked, her tone playful yet serious. I couldn't help but smile back, despite the weight of what lay ahead. "Let's start with the basics," I said, my voice steady as I met her gaze. "If you're going to be mine, you'll need to learn what that really means." She nodded, her expression determined as she stepped closer, her presence both overwhelming and comforting. "I'm ready," she said simply, her voice soft but unwavering. And as the stars outside the outpost shimmered against the endless black, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this unlikely partnership could become something more than either of us had ever imagined. Kalira's expression softened, a blend of eagerness and uncertainty painting her ethereal features. Her hand tightened slightly on mine, her cool skin a strange yet oddly comforting contrast to my warmth. I could see the anticipation in her eyes, a mixture of curiosity and determination that hinted she was ready for anything. Or at least she thought she was. "Before anything else," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we need to establish some ground rules. If you're going to be mine, as you say, then you need to trust me completely. That means no half measures, no second guessing." Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of something between challenge and surrender crossing her face. "I already said I trust you," she replied, her voice a soft melody. "But I don't want rules to cage me. I've had enough of that. I want you to show me what it's like to truly belong to someone. To submit." The word hung in the air, heavy with dual meaning. My chest tightened, and I fought to keep my composure. Her plea wasn't just about survival, it was about something deeper, more personal. Something she hadn't experienced in her life of royal duty and cold alliances. "You say that now," I countered, tilting my head slightly as I met her gaze. "But submission isn't just about giving up control. It's about trusting someone else to make the choices you can't. That's not as simple as it sounds, especially for someone like you." Her silver eyes narrowed, a teasing glint flashing across them. "And what makes you think I can't handle it? Do you underestimate me?" Earthling, she stepped closer, her slender frame brushing against mine, her voice dipping into a tone that sent a shiver down my spine. "Perhaps it's you who isn't ready for what I have to offer." Her boldness caught me off guard, and for a moment I couldn't find the words to respond. Kalira had a way of turning the tables, of shifting the dynamic in her favor, even as she claimed to surrender. It was both frustrating and exhilarating, like trying to outmaneuver a storm. "Careful," I said finally, my voice low and measured. "If you push too hard, you might find yourself in over your head." Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she tilted her head in that curious way she had, as though studying me from an entirely new angle. "Perhaps that's exactly what I want," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "To be pushed. To see how far you'll take me." The challenge in her words was impossible to ignore, and I felt a surge of something primal, something deeply human, rise within me. She wasn't just testing me, she was daring me to step into the role she'd laid at my feet. And despite every logical reason to walk away, I found myself stepping closer instead. "You really don't know what you're asking for," I said, my tone sharp but not unkind. "This isn't a game, Kalira. If you want to belong to me, then you have to be prepared to give me everything. No holding back, no pretending. Do you understand?" Her smile faded slightly, replaced by a seriousness that made her look almost vulnerable. "I understand," she said softly, her eyes locking onto mine, "and I'm ready." The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I realized there was no going back now. Kalira had made her choice, and whether I liked it or not, she was placing her fate in my hands. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, and I knew I had to tread carefully. "All right," I said after a moment, my voice steady but firm. "If you're serious about this, then we start now. First rule, you listen to me. No questions, no arguments. If I tell you to do something, you do it. Understood?" Her gaze didn't waver, and she nodded slowly, her expression a mix of defiance and acceptance. Understood. Good, I replied, my tone softening slightly. Then let's start simple. I want you to show me you're serious. Prove to me that you're ready to trust me completely. Kalira tilted her head, her silvery hair cascading over one shoulder as she considered my words. And how do I do that, she asked, her voice calm but curious. I stepped closer, closing the small gap between us until I could feel the warmth of her breath against my skin. By letting go, I said quietly. By giving me control, even when it scares you. Her eyes searched mine for a long moment, and I could feel the weight of the conflict inside her. For someone who had spent her entire life in control, surrendering wasn't just difficult, it was terrifying. But as she nodded slowly, I could tell she was ready to take the leap. All right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm yours. The simplicity of her words sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt a strange mix of pride and responsibility settle over me. Kalira wasn't just another alien or another mission, she was a challenge, a test of my own limits as much as hers. And as I looked into her luminous eyes, I knew this was only the beginning. Good, I said softly, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Then, let's see what you're capable of. Kalira's gaze didn't falter, her determination shining through even as she stepped into the unknown, and as the stars outside the outpost shimmered like distant promises, I realized that whatever lay ahead, we were in this together. For better or worse, Kalira had chosen me and I had chosen her. Kalira's gaze locked onto mine, her silver eyes reflecting the dim glow of the outpost lights. For all her bravado and royal poise, there was a flicker of hesitation in her expression, a vulnerability she seemed determined to hide. Yet she had made her choice, and now she waited, as if daring me to test her resolve. I stepped closer, the tension between us growing electric. You've given me control, I said, my voice low and deliberate, but you might not realize what that truly means. Her lips curved into a faint smile, her confidence slipping back into place. I've told you before, Earthling, I'm not one to shy away from a challenge. The question is, are you? I chuckled, shaking my head. You're making this too easy. But fine, if you want to play games, let's play. I reached out, brushing a strand of her silvery hair away from her face. Her breath hitched, a small, telling reaction that betrayed her composure. Rule 2, I continued, letting my hand linger a moment longer than necessary. You have to be honest with me. No hiding what you feel, no masking your reactions. If you're going to be mine, I need to know exactly what's going on in that head of yours. Her brow arched, a playful glint flashing in her eyes. And if what's going on in my head is something you can't handle? Trust me, I replied smoothly. I've handled worse. But I think you might be underestimating how much I can take. Her smile widened, her confidence growing as she leaned in closer. Oh, I think I've got a pretty good idea. You Earthlings are full of surprises, but I'm starting to think your bark is louder than your bite. Careful, I warned, my tone both teasing and firm. You might find out just how sharp my teeth are. Kalira tilted her head, her gaze dropping to my mouth for the briefest of moments before meeting my eyes again. Perhaps that's exactly what I'm hoping for, she murmured, her voice laced with dual meaning. The air between us grew heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that neither of us seemed eager to break. Kalira's boldness was both infuriating and intoxicating, a constant push and pull that kept me on edge. And as much as I wanted to maintain control, I couldn't deny the thrill of her challenge. Fine, I said finally, stepping back just enough to regain a sliver of composure. If you're so eager to test me, let's see how far you're willing to go. Her eyes lit up with a mixture of excitement and intrigue, and she straightened her posture, the regal air of her upbringing momentarily taking over. I told you, I'm ready for whatever you have in store. The question is, are you? I laughed, shaking my head at her audacity. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Not when the stakes are this high, she shot back, a coy smile tugging at her lips. All right, princess, I said, my tone dripping with mock seriousness. Let's make one thing clear: if you're going to be mine, you'd better be prepared to follow through. No backing out, no second thoughts. Her expression didn't falter, her confidence unwavering as she replied, I wouldn't have it any other way. The weight of her words hung in the air, and I realized there was no turning back. Kalira had laid her cards on the table, and now it was up to me to see the game through. All right then, I said, a mischievous grin spreading across my face. But don't say I didn't warn you. You might just bite off more than you can chew. Kailira leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper. I'm quite good at chewing, Earthling. The real question is, can you keep up? I blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her boldness. But before I could respond, she closed the distance between us, her presence overwhelming in the best way. Her cool fingertips brushed against my arm, her touch sending a shiver down my spine. You talk a big game, she continued, her tone teasing yet challenging. But I think it's time you prove it. Show me what it means to belong to someone on this strange little planet of yours. Her words were a direct challenge, and I knew there was no room for hesitation. She was daring me to take control, to push the boundaries she had so boldly offered up. And as much as I wanted to resist, to maintain some semblance of professionalism, I found myself stepping into her trap willingly. All right, I said, my voice firm but tinged with amusement. But don't blame me if you find yourself in over your head. Kailira's smile widened, her confidence practically radiating from her. Oh, I think I'll be just fine, she replied smoothly. I couldn't help but laugh at her audacity, shaking my head in disbelief. You really are something else, princess. And you're just now realizing that she teased, her tone light but full of meaning. The banter between us was a delicate dance, a constant push and pull that neither of us seemed eager to end, and as the night stretched on, the line between challenge and surrender began to blur, leaving us both wondering who was truly in control. Kailira's boldness was matched only by her curiosity, and as she stepped closer, her intentions became crystal clear. She wasn't just here to survive, she was here to understand, to experience, to push the limits of what she thought possible. And as much as I tried to maintain control, I couldn't deny the thrill of her challenge. You're playing a dangerous game, I said finally, my voice low and deliberate. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, and she leaned in close enough for her breath to brush against my cheek. Good, she murmured. I like danger. And with that, the balance between us shifted once more, leaving me to wonder just how far Kailira was willing to go and how long I could keep up.